The first shot cracked the afternoon heat and bit a fistful of adobe out of the wall over June Mercer's head. Dust salted her tongue. She flattened to the yard cheek, pressed to grit the stock of the Winchester warm against her palm. Out past the corral, 7 riders turned slow circles like coyotes that had learned the patience of hunger. Down, Elias rasped from the porch. His voice carried a rough-edge whiskey and years. He sat propped against the door jamb, a dark, wet bloom spreading through his shirt at the shoulder. He tried to make his hand light over it as if pressure alone could stitch him back together. June drew a breath and rolled to a knee. Heat shimmered above the scrub. She counted the riders, picked the one closest to the water trough, set the brass bead, and squeezed. The rifle bucked. Her target jerked more from surprise than pain and wheeled away whooping. Laughter rose across the yard, easy and mean. A rangy bay broke from the circle, pounding straight in. 20 paces, 15, 10. June steadied her second shot. An arrow hissed. It slammed into the dirt in front of the bay with a thud and a short quiver, the shaft planted as straight as a surveyor's stake. The horse reared iron shoes, scraping front legs, clawing the hot air. Silence dropped all at once like a blanket pulled over a flame. He stepped up from the skeleton shade of a cholla just past the dry wash. Tall, steady hair tied back with a leather thong. Sun made a thin gloss on the silver feather that lay at his throat. He held a bow at an angle that was not yet threat, not quite rest. "Leave," he said. Not loud, not harsh, the word landed with weight. The riders glanced at one another. The man in front, Jeb Sloan, worked his jaw. A ragged scarf hid the lower half of his face, but his eyes were bright with a kind of cocky heat. "This ain't your dirt," he called. "It was Apache land before your fences," the stranger said. "Leave." Jeb pulled on the reins and backed his bay a step, testing the line like a man testing ice. The stranger took one pace forward. That was all it took. Jeb jerked his chin. The others peeled off with a spray of dust, slow at first, then faster, heading for the break in the ridge. Jeb looked over his shoulder and spat in the dirt. "Not done," he said. "Not by a long shot." Hoofbeats faded. Wind filled the yard again, hot and thin, carrying the creak of rope and the faint rattle of a dry windmill vane. June kept her sights on the gap in the ridge until the last glint of metal was gone. She rose only when the quiet felt honest. The stranger lowered his bow and scanned the horizon the way men who live outside roofs learn to do. His gaze moved measured toward the porch. June crossed the yard fast and slid down at her father's side. Blood had soaked deeper, gone from bright to russet the way blood does when it begins to think about staying. "It's a graze," Elias said, breathing hard. "Barbed wire's done worse." It had not. Up close, June could see his face had gone the color of old paper. She tore a strip from a clean feed sack and pressed it to his shoulder. The smell of iron rose through the thinner scent of sweat and dust. The stranger came closer with his hands where she could see them. No hurry, no sway. He moved like water that knows the shape of its bedrock. He was older than June had first thought from a distance. Lines at the corners of his eyes, not from smiling. He stopped short of the porch and tipped his chin at Elias's wound. "You need to clean that," he said. "Let me get water." June lifted the rifle a touch. "Stop there." He halted. His eyes were dark and very still. "My name is Calder," he said. "Who sent you?" June asked. "Nobody," Calder said. "I saw riders on the ridge. I do not like watching men die when I can prevent it." Elias tried to push himself up and failed. He exhaled with a short hiss and glanced at the stranger, something unreadable in the set of his mouth. "Water's in the kitchen," he said. "Come in." June turned on him. "We are not in a position to pick and choose who helps," Elias said. His voice had that steady note he used when he wanted a thing done without argument. He hooked 2 fingers under the door trim and hauled himself upright. "Bring him in." June kept her rifle handy and backed into the house as Calder slipped through the door. The kitchen was clean because June could not stand it otherwise. The table scarred and solid. The tin coffee pot sat where she had left it at dawn, its belly gone dull with use. Elias's cane leaned in the corner. The wood was worn shiny at the grip. Faint letters cut there, old and careful. T.G. Calder went to the basin, pumped the handle. The pump wheezed and coughed. What came out was thin and warm, no smoke of cold. The drought had eaten the cool out of everything. He soaked a cloth and came back to the table. June set a bottle of iodine down, and the air filled with its bitter bite. She poured whiskey into a chipped cup and into her father in equal measure. Calder did not reach for Elias like a man who assumes the right. He waited until Elias nodded. Then he pressed the wet cloth to the wound, checked the cut with a quick, skilled eye, and tied off a bandage tight enough to slow the seep. June watched his hands. Scar on the first knuckle, a crescent. work that left marks. The silver feather at his throat moved with his breath and threw a thread of light across his collarbone. "How come you were close enough to see our trouble?" she asked. Calder's gaze shifted to her and back to the work. "There are prints all along Pale Creek," he said. "Some belong to men who prefer to take than trade. They like desperate places. This is desperate land." June thought of the heel marks she had found yesterday where someone had stood and watched the house long enough to grind deeper than a normal step. Her neck prickled. She felt the grit still caught at the sweat line along her hair. Elias drank. The tremor in his hand eased. Color did not return to his face. He looked at Calder for a breath that stretched. "You have done me a service," Elias said. "I will not forget that." Calder inclined his head. "I did what was right." "Right," Elias repeated. He looked toward the counter, toward the little tobacco tin that lived in the shadow of the coffee grinder. He had left it out this morning when he thought June would be across the pasture. Its lid caught light. He slid it back with his fingers, a movement he tried to make small. June saw the habit more than the tin itself, a thing handled often not for tobacco. Calder moved to the window and looked out at the yard. The arrow still stood planted in the dirt. He reached up and touched the silver feather at his throat as if checking it had not left him. "You brought a bow to a gunfight," June said. He glanced back, a hint of something that might have been humor in the line of his mouth. "I brought the thing I know how to use best." Silence rose and settled. The old clock on the shelf ticked like a patient heart. Outside, the windmill knocked a slow clack against itself. Elias pushed his empty cup away. He straightened in the chair as if memory of his spine could make up for the slip of his flesh. "I was wrong about some things for a long time," he said. "I will not be wrong about this." June felt her stomach go tight before he finished. She knew his tone, the one that came out when he had already made the decision on the road in his head, and was only now stepping into it with his boots. "You saved our lives," Elias said to Calder. "A life like that is not repaid with a handshake." "Pa," June said. He looked at her and kept going steady as a nail through green wood. "It is repaid through family," Elias said. "Through blood." June set the rifle down without meaning to and stood very still. Elias lifted his chin at Calder. "My daughter will marry you," he said. "That is how this debt is paid." The room held that sentence the way a bell holds a note after the strike. June heard the windmill. She heard the blood in her own ears. She saw Calder's eyes dark and unreadable, and her father's bright, with a kind of fierce calm she did not recognize at all. The word hung in the kitchen so long June felt it nick her skin. She found her voice. "No." Calder did not move. His eyes shifted from Elias to June and back again, taking the measure of a trap he had not set. "I did not ask for that," he said. "You saved me," Elias said. "Saved her. A debt like that cannot be palmed off with thanks." June planted a hand on the table to steady the rush in her head. "You are bleeding through the bandage and talking foolish. Sit quiet." Calder's gaze settled on Elias's shoulder. "He needs rest. I will wait outside." He turned for the door. June did not stop him. The room felt larger when he was gone and somehow thinner. Elias blew air through his teeth and looked away from her. "You cannot pick my life like you pick a horse," June said. Elias closed his eyes. "We will talk when my head is not ringing." He did not talk. He drifted into a hard sleep in his chair, chin to chest breath sawed short. June stood in the doorway and watched Calder cross to the far side of the yard. He passed the arrow without looking at it, and took up a place near the empty tank where the windmill threw a weak shadow. He put his shoulders to the corrugated iron and slid down until he sat in the grit. The silver feather at his throat caught light and went still. June needed air that was not heavy with iodine and whiskey. She slung the rifle and walked the fence line. Wire hummed in the wind. Grass snapped under her boots. Sage gave off a tired smell when the heat pressed it. Pale Creek was a scar. The channel had baked flat. Coyote prints and the long commas of snake tracks stitched the surface. June cut down into the wash and followed it to the first bend. In the lee of a cottonwood, someone had stood long enough to grind heel into sand. She could feel it in the way the ground held her. Watched from here, the house was a small, pale shape in glare. "You keep turning up in the same places," a voice said. She did not whirl. She knew that voice now. Calm, unhurried, a kind of patience inside it. Calder stepped from behind the tree and into the fade of its shade. "I walk where the country makes sense," she said. He looked at the print she had been studying. Men with hunger in them stood here yesterday. She swallowed dust. "You told us they would return." "They like houses with thin fences and tired people," he said. "They like drought. It makes men easy to read." The heat rasped in June's throat. "Why are you watching our fence?" "You are not the only ones being watched," he said. He let the thought sit. Up north, a small place was hit. 2 nights ago. The man there stood when he should have waited. His wife sent for help and none came. "You listen to a lot," June said. "I listen when noise matters." He glanced at the sky. Smells like rain, but there is no rain in it. Only trouble. They stood quiet a moment. The sound of a grasshopper's wings ran hard and sudden through the wash and then quit. June shifted her grip on the rifle and looked at him straight. "My father does not give away his daughter," she said. "Not to pay a bill, not to you, not to any man." Calder's mouth cut a line that was not humor and not displeasure. "Good," he said. "I do not intend to collect you." "Then why stay?" "I'm not staying," he said. "I'm waiting." "For what?" "For him to stop bleeding," he said. "For the men who rode in to decide who they want to be." He moved past her and walked up the wash. He did not look back. The sun took him and made a shimmer where he went. By the time June returned, the light had shifted toward late. The yard looked empty again, in the way places look empty, after fear has passed through them. Elias had left the chair and retired to the small room off the hall. The door stood ajar. His cane leaned against it, the worn grip bright from use. The letters T and G cut there had always felt like a sawtooth on the finger. She ran her thumb over them and felt the shallow cut. In the kitchen, the coffee grinder crouched on the counter like an old black cricket. Behind it, where the shadow kept the heat off, sat the tobacco tin. If it had held tobacco, it no longer did. The lid was dented in one corner. The hinge squeaked like a mouse when she lifted it. Paper filled the space. Folded sheets thin as onion skin from age smelled faintly of dust, and an old sweet she could not place. Underneath, a daguerreotype lay wrapped in cloth. The oval plate caught the window and then gave her a face in silver. A young woman, hair dark and loose to her shoulders, mouth set as if ready to smile but not yet letting herself. Eyes that pried. June's chest tugged without her permission. It was like looking in a mirror that had found a cousin. She turned the plate. The back was marked with a name in a careful hand. Rosalind. June went back to the letters. The paper crackled the way dry grass does when you step wrong. Ink had browned to the color of tea left too long. The first line was simple, steady. "My dearest Thomas. They tell me I have disgraced our family. Perhaps I have only left it to find my own. The child is strong. He watches everything. I named him for a thing that does not break when water runs over it. For patience. For endurance." June read until the words swam. She saw the mission clinic in her mind because of the way the letter spoke of it. The clean sting of alcohol, the sound of soft shoes on tile, the hum of Maggie's voice in the hall. She read about the plan to return to town, to ask forgiveness and be denied it, to leave a message where Thomas might find it if he tried. The floor breathed under a weight. June turned. Elias stood in the doorway. His face had lost color and most of the expression that made it his. His eyes, though, were awake and hard. "What are you doing?" he said. June kept the plates in her fingers and did not hide them. "Reading what you would not let me know." He crossed the distance with 2 steps that were more anger than strength. He took the plate and the letters and the tin together and held them in his arms. "That is not yours," he said. "It has everything to do with me," she said. "Who is Rosalind? Who is Thomas? Are you Thomas?" His jaw worked slow. "Calder is not my son," he said, as if that solved any part of anything. She folded her hands at her sides to keep from shaking. "You did not answer what I asked." Elias looked at the tin as if it had decided to bite him. He turned toward his room. "We will talk later," he said. "You said that before." "Later," he said again. He closed the door. The click was quiet and had more final in it than it deserved. June did not sleep. The night held heat and the smell of old wood. Wind scraped the yard with grit until the windows hissed. Elias groaned once and then went quiet. When light pressed into the cracks of the curtains, June rose, took a list she had written on a feed sack scrap, and saddled the bay. Calder stood at the fence watching the ridge. He did not ask where she was going. She did not ask if he would trail her. He dipped his head. She rode. Sagebrush Ridge had a way of throwing dust up and keeping it when you wanted it to fall. The town wore a coat of pale grit that no one could brush off. The bell above Kinney's General made a tired sound when June pushed in. Inside it smelled of coffee leather and oil. Walt Kinney looked up from a ledger and blinked twice like a man coming out of his own head. "June," he said, "you run out of everything at once." "Seems so," she said. She slid the list across: bandages, coffee, salt, a small bottle of laudanum. Walt read the last item and lifted an eyebrow. Somebody hurt. Nicked at the shoulder, she said, not giving him more. He gathered her order slow. The store had bald spots on the shelves where flowers should have been, and places where the sun had bleached labels to ghosts. As he wrapped a spool of thread, he lowered his voice. "Folks say you got company at your place," he said. "The kind some folks do not call company." "I heard folks say a lot," June said. Walt cleared his throat. "Colonel Blackwell was in here at first light. Asked after your father. Asked after the weather. Asked after what I hear. He was particular about the last part." June held his gaze. We are a free house. Walt returned the look for a long tick and then glanced away. Free houses cost these days. He set the package on the counter. Tell your father a man came by last night, said the Jensen place farther north got cleaned out. You keep an eye open. June paid. The coins left her palm with a weight she hated to feel. She stepped into the glare and almost collided with a woman holding a roll of calico under one arm and a parasol in the other. The parasol tilted, scattering light across both their faces. "Careful, child," the woman said. Her voice had a nurse's firmness, warm and unbothered. She squinted, then smiled. "June Mercer." June blinked. "Ma'am." "Maggie O'Shea," the woman said. "You look like your mother around the eyes. Come." She did not ask. She turned and walked, and June found her feet going after because something in the way Maggie carried that parasol told you she had spent a life directing rooms and making rooms obey. Maggie's cottage sat off the main street under a cottonwood that hummed with bees. Inside smelled of lemon and liniment, and the faint, clean bite of carbolic that seems to cling to women who have done hard work with gentleness. On the wall hung a child's drawing in charcoal, a river curling through tall grass. On a shelf, a woven basket held a crucifix and a string of glass beads. "You knew my mother," June said. "I did," Maggie said, "and other women besides." She poured lemonade that tasted of sun in old tin cups and set a glass in June's hand. "Sit and listen, and do not flinch." She told it in pieces the way a person tells a thing she has told herself for years but never said aloud. The mission at San Isidro, a young woman from a good house who came anyway and learned names in Apache and brought bread and warmth. Rosalind Blackwell, the brother who thought pride was a kind of armor. Archer. The day Rosalind married a man Maggie called Red Hawk because that was the name he had brought with him, and because he earned it with the way he stood on rock and saw far. When the fever took him, Maggie said she thought to come home, not to kneel. To stand and ask for her son to be known. It was not allowed. So a message went to a young officer with a straight back and bad timing. Thomas Grady. He tried to help her. Maggie went quiet. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. Outside, a wagon wheel creaked as someone rolled past. Soldiers rode to Pale Creek without orders they would write down, Maggie said. They burned it so there would be nothing left to argue over. The boy was carried to the mission because he had no one else to carry him. June swallowed, and Thomas. He had the good sense to live, Maggie said. For a while. Then he disappeared. Your father turned up around that time with a new name, a new cane, and a way of staring at the horizon when he thought no one watched. June did not speak for a count of 10. She looked at the shelf, at the basket, at the drawing of a river done by a child who had watched the way water behaves, and then tried to put it down. "You are telling me my father is Thomas Grady," she said. "It came out level because anything else would shake." "I am telling you the pieces fit," Maggie said. "What you do with pieces is not my say." June stood. Her mouth had gone dry. The lemonade made a sour road out of her throat. She set the glass down and moved to the window to pull air across her face. The street below shimmered. Heat slung light everywhere. Something black and polished swung into view at the far end of the road. A carriage with 2 matched bays and a driver who sat like a man who has never heard the word hurry. The sun picked silver off a headpiece and a cane end, and the carriage turned its long nose toward the road out of town, the way to the ridge. Maggie came to the window and looked without speaking. June watched the wheels cut 2 clean lines in dust that would seal up again behind them. She felt the air shift as if a door deeper in the world had opened. She did not wait for words. She stepped away from the glass, tucked her hat tight, and went for her horse. The street widened around her, white with heat, while the carriage rolled on toward the Mercer place and the country beyond held its breath. Dust burned June's throat all the way home. The black carriage was already in the yard, the matched bays standing like carved animals, harness brass, dull with heat. Colonel Archer Blackwell took the porch steps with the care of a man who had not needed to hurry for a long time. He held a silver-tipped cane that clicked once on the top stair. His suit had no dust on it. His hair was white and neat. His eyes were pale as thin ice. Elias sat in a chair by the door, face drawn and gray bandage seeping at the edge. Calder stood near the empty tank, quiet as shade watching. The arrow still stuck in the yard, straight as a ruler. Miss Mercer Blackwell said calm and polite. "I rode to see how your father fared. A man should check on his neighbors." June did not climb to the porch. She looked up and met his eyes. "You chose a hot hour to be kind." "The hour was not my choice," Blackwell said. His gaze slid to Calder. "I hear you have unusual company," Guess June said. Blackwell smiled without moving his eyes. "The word depends on the house." He turned toward Elias. "May I come in out of this sun?" At our age, these afternoons do a number on the heart. Elias pushed to his feet with a breath. We will all go inside. He said it with the old command in his voice. Blackwell nodded once as if he had allowed it and went through the door. The kitchen held the day's heat like a bowl. Light came in at a slant and made ladders on the wall. The clock ticked. The pump wheezed. The tin coffee pot wore its familiar coat of dull. Blackwell chose the good chair and settled the cane against his knee. June stayed standing close enough to the stove to feel a different kind of heat at her side. Calder took the place by the window where he could see the yard. I did not catch your name, Blackwell said to Calder. Calder. No family name. None you need to know. Blackwell's mouth tightened by a hair. He touched his cane and then withdrew his hand as if the silver might burn. Fort Stanton has had trouble with raiders. Men use Apache names to give their crimes a story. He waited as if expecting Calder to fill the space. Calder did not. We have had our own trouble, June said. Look in the yard. I saw it, Blackwell said. This is why I am here. Men are quick to test fences when water is low. He leaned back, but the set of his shoulders said forward. Your father tells me a bowman scattered your visitors. Scattered them enough, Elias said. It is an odd choice of tool, Blackwell said, eyes still on Calder. It served, Calder said. Blackwell studied him, a long beat, then turned to June. I remember your mother, he said. She was kind to everyone, even when it muddled lines that should have stayed clear. She taught me to read before she taught me to iron, June said. I can tell when a sentence is crooked. The colonel's smile shifted in a small way. Cleverness is a poor fence against hunger, Miss Mercer. Better than pride, June said. Elias picked up his cup, found it empty, put it down. His gaze moved between the two of them and then fixed on a point just past Blackwell's shoulder, as if the wall held a horizon only he could see. Colonel, he said, voice rough, we can do civilities after we do truth. Blackwell stilled. Truth is a large word. It fits the room, Elias said. June heard her own pulse. She saw the tin by the grinder out of the corner of her eye. The seam of its lid flickered in the light. The letters T and G on the cane grip by the door felt like a shout in a quiet town. Rosalind, June said. She put the name into the air like a stone into a pond. Blackwell's eyes did not move, but something in his face did. A thin tightening high on the cheekbones. I do not know who you mean. You do, June said. Your sister. The mission at San Isidro, Pale Creek. The cane slipped on his knee and clinked on the floor. He picked it up slow. Elias's hand closed on the table edge. He drew himself up the way a man does when there is no more room to back up. My name was Thomas Grady, he said. I wore a blue coat. I carried orders for men who liked paper. I carried other messages, too. The clock sounded loud for a breath. Outside, a gust lifted grit and made the windmill rattle. You should have left well enough alone, Blackwell said. There was nothing polite in his voice now. Your father came to me once with a simple bargain, Miss Mercer. Silence for safety. He broke it the moment this savage set foot on your porch. Say the word again, Calder said quietly. He had not moved from the window. The line of his mouth had gone knife-thin. Blackwell looked at him and did not say it again. He set the cane more firmly by his knee and laced his fingers in his lap. The territory is built on order, he said. Sometimes order requires hard choices. You burned a village, June said. No question in it. Blackwell's eyes found hers. I secured a border. I did what men in my position are presupposed to do. You sent men without paper, Elias said. You sent them because Rosalind wrote and told me she was coming home. She wanted her boy to be known. You wanted smoke and cinders where her name had been. The front door opened. Boots scuffed in the hall. Maggie O'Shea's voice came first mild and steady, the way it always did when she had walked into a room on purpose. You did not have the right to decide that Archer, she said. She came into the kitchen with a small wrapped bundle in her hands. Walt Kinney followed, hat in his hands, eyes hard. Two men from town stood behind him. Men June knew only by their shoulders and the way they favored one leg over the other. Blackwell rose with a look that was not quite surprise. Mrs. O'Shea, this does not concern you. It concerns me, Maggie said. I sat with your sister when she brought a life into this world. I sat with women whose houses you turned to ash. I kept a thing for 20 years because she asked it. Maggie set the bundle on the table and unwound the cloth. A letter lay inside. The paper had gone soft at the folds. The ink had sunk to a rich brown. June did not breathe. Maggie did not touch it with bare fingers. She nodded to Calder. It is hers, she said. It should be read by blood. Calder stepped to the table and looked down. He did not reach right away. He stood until the lines on the page seemed to float out of their place. Then he picked it up like something that could break. He read without letting his mouth make any sound. The room was so quiet June could hear the slow slide of the wind outside and the small click of the clock at the end of each second. When Calder finished, he looked at Blackwell. The look was not a strike. It was a measure. "She knew," he said. His voice did not waver. "She knew it was you." Blackwell's eyes slid away and came back. There was a hollowness in them that had not been there when he stepped onto the porch. He reached out his hand. Calder did not give him the letter. Calder tilted it so that Blackwell could see. The colonel read. His mouth pulled once on the right and then went still. Elias drew a breath that shook. He pushed himself to his feet too fast, and the chair stuttered on the floor. He pulled open the drawer under the counter and took out the old Colt he had kept there since they came to this house. He set the barrel toward Blackwell and pulled the hammer back. The sound was small and cut clean through the room. Pajun said, but it came more as an airless shape than a word. Blackwell did not flinch. He watched the muzzle. He did not look away. His hand went toward his cane and stopped halfway. Calder moved without hurry. He came around the table and set his hand on the barrel with a pressure that was not force and was not a suggestion either. He set it with the steadiness of a man who has held the weight of tools and known that tools have their own kind of gravity. If you shoot him, Calder said, you will swing because men like him still own ropes. People will say you were mad. They will say the truth we have will bleed out with you and make a small dark spot on this floor that the dust will eat. Elias's arm shook. The gun drifted and came back. His eyes had filled not with the kind of water that spills, but the kind that fogs the sight from the inside. "I tried," he said. "I wrote her. I ran orders around orders. I did not do enough." "You tried," Calder said. "She wrote it." He tapped the letter with a knuckle. "She forgave. Not him. You." Elias's breath came ragged. The muzzle dipped. He thumbed the hammer down and set the Colt on the table. His hand stayed on it a second longer than it needed to, and then let go. No one spoke. The room felt larger by a fraction. The color had drained from Blackwell's face. He closed his eyes and opened them again. The skin at his neck had lost its set and gone loose. "What do you want?" he said to Calder. The words sounded like they had left a mark on his throat on the way out. "The truth with light on it," Calder said. "Not behind doors. Compensation for the families that still breathe. A public apology that uses my mother's name." Blackwell looked at Maggie, looked at Walt, looked at Elias, and then back to Calder. He put one hand on the table to steady himself. The silver tip of his cane pressed a round mark into the pine. "I have friends," he said, weaker. "Men in Santa Fe, men in Washington." "Your friends did not ride into Pale Creek," Maggie said. "You did." Blackwell swallowed. He nodded once small as if his neck did not want to do it. "I will speak," he said. "I will write. I will put my name under it." Walt Kinney let out a breath. It sounded like something he had kept in for years. Maggie wrapped the letter again, careful as before. She looked at Blackwell, and for a second her face softened in a way that did not erase what he had done and did not try to. "You should go home," she said. "Sit in your quiet and think on how to use your last good days to set something straight." Blackwell took up his cane and stood. For a moment he looked smaller, as if the suit no longer fit the man inside it. He nodded to Elias. He did not look at June. He did look at Calder, and the look said he had seen him for the first time as more than a problem with a shape. He went to the porch. The light hit him full. He got into the carriage without help. The driver flicked the reins. The wheels cut 2 new lines in the dust and then dimmed. The kitchen breathed. Elias sank down. His hands were empty now, and he seemed surprised to find them that way. June poured water and wished it was colder. She set the glass in front of him. He did not drink. "I'm sorry," he said. The words were slow and careful. "I took too long to say it." Maggie touched his shoulder. "You said it." Walt pushed his hat back and looked at the ceiling as if he might find better air up there. "I will spread word," he said. "No more whisper. Folks will listen. The drought has wrung us out. A truth like this will ring." They left as the light went down into the cracks of the hills. The wind dropped and the yard went still. The arrow's fletching turned the color of rust in the last thread of sun. June helped Elias to his room. She took off his boots, tucked the sheet under his feet like her mother had taught her. He closed his eyes and slept without a fight. She stepped onto the porch. The heat had loosened its grip. The sky had gone the good blue that happens after a hard day. Somewhere a nighthawk stitched the air with a low call and the soft thrum of wings. Calder stood in the yard. He had pulled the arrow from the dirt. He turned it in his hands once, and then laid it along the fence top like a man putting a tool away. A rider came up the road at a trot, a boy no older than 16, hat too big, shirt too thin. "Miss Mercer," he said, sliding off and catching himself when his knees buckled. "Mr. Kinney sent me. The colonel. They found him in his study. Doctor says his heart quit." The boy stood there, breathing hard chest, jumping under the shirt. The windmill gave one lazy clack as it turned. June reached up and took hold of the porch post. The wood was warm, the grain bit her palm. She watched the boy's mouth shape the last word and felt the air go still again, the way it had when the arrow hit dirt and the horse reared. Morning laid a thin gray over the ridge. The yard felt scraped clean as if the night had taken a layer with it. June brewed coffee that tasted like boiled nails and poured cups for hands that did not know what to do yet. Elias sat at the table with his shoulder bandaged fresh, the skin beneath still hot. Calder stood at the window where he had stood before. The arrow was gone from the yard. He had put it along the fence last night and left it there like a rule. Hooves came steady up the road. Walt Kinney led a short man in a black coat with a leather satchel. The satchel creaked when he set it on the table. "Mr. Hartley," Walt said, "Colonel's lawyer." Hartley took off his hat and smoothed his hair in a nervous line. His eyes kept going to the bandage on Elias, then to Calder, then to the coffee pot, as if trying to pick the least complicated thing to look at. "I am sorry for the hour," he said, "and for what brings me here. Colonel Blackwell signed documents last night. He had them witnessed. He asked me to carry them at first light. I was on my way when I heard." He opened the satchel. The smell of wax and ink climbed out clean and old. He took out an envelope with 2 red seals and a folded letter wrapped in a strip of muslin. He set the letter in front of Calder. "For you," he said, "in your mother's name." Calder did not sit. He broke the seal with a thumb. The paper crackled like a dry leaf. He read, and his face did not tell what it found. He set the letter down and stepped back. Hartley put out the second packet. "This is the Colonel's statement," he said to the room, "and his will as amended. He names in detail what he did at Pale Creek. He names men. He names no orders except his own. He directs that the families known to have survived receive money and stock from his estate. He directs that his house and holdings pass to the next of kin of Rosalind Blackwell." Hartley turned to Calder. "That is you." Nobody spoke. Somewhere outside, a fly tapped the screen in a soft, regular circle. Elias cleared his throat. He did one right thing before the last. Hartley nodded. "You should know there is process. The court in Santa Fe will need the statement. The probate judge will need time. The transfer is not a handshake. For the deed to vest clean Mr. Calder, you must remain within county bounds until the filings are complete. It will not be a day. It may be a year." Calder's eyes went to the ridgeline without moving from where he stood. June saw the way the restlessness in him met that request like a fence meets a fast horse. "A year is a long time," he said. "It is how the law behaves," Hartley said. He folded his hands, then unfolded them. "I will ride to town and wire Santa Fe. Word will go out proper. I would like to leave these with you, Miss Mercer, if that sits. They will be safer in a house where folks know how to keep quiet for a few hours." June took the papers. The wax was smooth under her thumb. The edges were sharp. She slid them into a flour tin and set it under the cupboard where the floor stayed cool. Hartley and Walt left with the promise of riders coming by sundown. The morning worked into noon. Heat laid its palm on the house again. Elias dozed and woke in short starts. Calder drifted through the yard with the slow look of a man learning a place he might have to call his. Word rides faster than men. Before the sun was low, Jeb Sloan showed with 2 in his pocket, faces ragged with sleep lost and drink gone off. They did not come down the road. They came over the pasture straight across a line of posts, and their horses blew hard by the time they reached the yard. "Sad thing about the Colonel," Jeb said. His eyes went to the house, then to the tank, then to the windmill. He smiled a small smile that had no humor in it. "Leaves a lot of loose ends." June stepped onto the porch with the rifle low. The shadow lay cool at her back. Calder moved into the yard and stood half between her and the riders. He set his hands easy at his sides. Jeb turned his horse in a half circle and let it chew at the bit. "Heard tell the ranch is free now," Jeb said. "No one watching. Might be time to spread the wealth." "You are not taking anything here," June said. Jeb ran his tongue along his teeth and spat. "You do not have enough men to be saying that." "I have enough light," June said. She dropped the match into the lantern wick she had set on the porch step, and the glass caught flame. Calder moved to the second lantern by the tank and lit it too. The small circles of fire made brighter shadows and pushed the yard's edges back. The men squinted, their horses rolled eyes at the light. Elias came to the door with his cane and the gun not lifted, only present. He looked like a man who had stood at more doors than one and knew how to use a threshold. "You boys aim to steal from a house where a woman is standing and a wounded man is looking," he said. "That will buy you friends." Jeb laughed a short bark. "Your friends either died or rode for better pasture. Blackwell kept your roof from burning a long while. Roof is bare now." The windmill turned once and gave its dry clack. A hawk cut low over the far fence and vanished. Calder stepped farther into the yard. He drew the bow off his shoulder and strung it in one smooth pull. He palmed an arrow and set it without haste. The point aimed at the ground. Jeb's eyes went to it as if pulled. "I am tired," Calder said. "I do not want to put wood in a man." He lifted the point a fraction. "But I will put wood in a horse that deserves better than you." The rider to Jeb's left shifted in his saddle. He was younger, the kind who looks to another man's face before he acts. His horse sidled at the light and the sound of the windmill. Sweat lay bright along its neck. Elias took one step forward. The cane clicked on the board, and the gun looked like an old thing that had done work and could do it again. "You were never as bold when the colonel breathed," Elias said. "You are trying on a new coat because the old one fell. It does not fit you." Jeb's grin dropped. The truth nicked him where pride sits. His horse tossed its head. A rider back near the pasture gate whistled low a warning. Hoofbeats sounded from the road, quick and even. 3 shapes came out of the heat shimmer and resolved into men with county badges at their chests. Walt led them. He had a rifle across his lap and a look that said he would not mind work. "That will do," Walt called. "You boys are paid up on foolish. Go home before you owe more." Jeb held the look with June for a count, then with Calder for a count longer. He tugged his reins and the bay spun. The 2 with him cut away. They headed north, not fast, not slow heads low, as if the heat had gotten heavier. Walt rode up and swept the yard with his eyes. "They will test fences for a few weeks," he said. "Then they will find someone else to swagger at." He touched the brim of his hat and looked to Calder. "You have more news incoming. Hartley is wiring the judge now." When the riders left, the yard got quiet in a more honest way. June gathered the lanterns and set them on the steps, glass warm under her hands. Calder unstrung the bow and put the string in his pocket. He looked older than he had in the morning, not in the face, in the weight he stood under. Inside, Elias eased into a chair and caught his breath. June knelt and checked the bandage. The skin had gone from angry to sullen. The seep had slowed. "You stood steady," she said. "Too many years of standing with my back to a door," he said. He touched the edge of the bandage, and then his gaze drifted to the cane. The letters on the grip caught a little of the lantern light and made a small shadow on his palm when he closed his hand around them. June crossed to the peg by the door and took down the silver feather. Calder had hung it there last night when he slept by the barn. She turned it in her fingers. The metal was cool. It caught the light and gave it back softer. She brought it to Elias and set it in his palm. He looked at it the way a man looks at a small thing he does not think he deserves to hold. "Keep it," she said, "so your hand remembers what to hold." He nodded once, throat working. He slipped the feather into the breast pocket of his shirt and patted it as if to be sure it would not leave him. Evening slid in and took the weight out of the light. Walt came back with Hartley and 2 county men. Hartley had dust on his coat now and lines at the corners of his mouth that had not been there at dawn. "The judge has the wire," he said. "He will accept the statement when it arrives by post. The probate petition is set. Mr. Calder, the condition stands. You will need to stay in county until I can turn the clerk's crank. A man who takes charge of land he is not tending is a man with trouble. A man who keeps charge is one the law can see." Calder listened. He did not ask for the rule to bend. He looked at the doorway at the yard, at the line of the ridge where dusk had climbed halfway and paused. "How long?" he said. Hartley spread his hands honest about not knowing, enough time to make it count. Calder stepped to the porch. The air had cooled an inch. The sky over the far hills held a faint bruised color that sometimes means weather if weather remembers this country. He set his fingers on the porch post where June's hand had pressed earlier. The wood was warm still. He stood that way and looked at the land that had been given to a man's name and was now offered to blood. He did not move for a long breath. Heat pressed flat at noon, but the big room held a gentler breath. Light fell through tall windows onto a row of desks that had been dragged in from 3 different places and made to agree. Chalk dust floated and turned in the beams. A map of the county hung over the mantel where a mirror once sat. The mirror leaned now in a back hallway with a cloth over it. Children sounded like water when it finally finds a cut in rock. English braided with Apache, a few Spanish words in the mix. They recited by halves and burst into laughter when a boy miscounted on purpose and got caught. Elias stood at the front with his cane set aside and a book in his hand. The silver feather rode in his shirt pocket, just visible when he turned. He tapped the board with a stub of chalk, and the room settled without him needing to raise his voice. In the parlor that had never felt like a parlor to June, Maggie O'Shea set out bandages and a small bottle of carbolic. The clean sting of it met the smell of coffee from the kitchen. A woman from the Riverlands waited with a baby who had a cough. Maggie listened with her head cocked and her eyes soft. She sent the mother home with a tonic and a sack of flour that had been set aside for reasons that were called reasons and were really something else. Out in the yard, the new sign sat on 2 posts. The letters had been carved by Walt's son and sanded smooth by Calder. Dawnstar Foundation. The paint had just dried 2 days ago, and June had almost touched it and left a print before she caught herself. The wood still gave a faint resin smell when the sun hit it a quiet sweetness under the iron scents of dry. June worked the windmill platform. The bolts had grown stiff. Oil turned them back to what they should be. Metal heated her palms. Skin-slicked hair stuck to her neck. Her shirt clung to her spine. Calder climbed the last rung with a wrench hooked to his belt and a coil of new rope over his shoulder. From up there, the land knocked June quiet. The fields that had gone to brown last year held a likelier color. Not green yet, not dead. Waiting. Calder set the wrench and leaned into it until the head groaned and gave. A breeze found them this high and ran salt over their lips. He wiped his wrist across his face and grinned without showing teeth the way he did when the world did a small right thing. "Turn it," he said. June reached for the lever. The blade swung slow and then found the wind and began a true circle. The pump coughed. Air rattled in the pipe and then the sound deepened. The tank answered with a dull ring. June felt the run through the pole under her hand, a vibration like a heart waking up. They climbed down into heat that had learned their names. Calder took the rope to the troughs. June gathered the tools and felt the first pressure of cloud on the back of her neck before she saw it. She looked toward the south. A line of blue had stacked behind the gobernator and grown up into the hard white. The smell came next. Creosote and dust turned sweet, and the hair on June's arms rose. A drop hit the porch board and made a dark coin. 2 more found the rim of the tank and spread into circles that touched and became one. The children in the schoolroom went quiet all at once hearing it. Then they screamed, and the kind of screaming that only means joy poured out the door with them. They ran into the yard and held hands up and laughed when the rain made cold marks on their cheeks. Elias step-hopped to the threshold, half-scold on his tongue, and then something else climbed up past it and took his mouth. He laughed. It was a sound June had not heard since her mother kept bread warm in a towel and set it on this same kind of table in a different house. He pushed his hair back and let the drops speckle his glasses and did not wipe them. The feather tucked in his pocket showed wet at the edge like metal that has just seen a river. The rain meant it. It took the yard in both hands and squeezed. Dust leapt into mud in a minute, and cows bawled in surprise at their own water. The windmill turned faster and sang a tired note that sounded less tired with every pass. Gutters that had not carried a thing in months began to talk to themselves in a low gurgle. The tank knocked full with a new base and gave the extra back into the barrel line and then into the earth. June stood bareheaded in it until her hair was a dark rope on her neck. The drops stung where they hit and left cool trails, and the dirt under her boots gave in and took her heel a half-inch as if the ground had decided she could stand closer. Calder walked toward her slow, the rain slicking his shirt and drawing lines down his throat. He stopped close enough that she could see the hickory flecks in his eyes. Water took the color and made it move. "Feels like a thing I prayed for once," he said. "You stayed long enough to see it," she said. He looked toward the ridge where new dark had settled. He drew a breath like a man filling his chest for something that fit. "I thought I did not know how to stay," he said. "Turns out I did not know what to stay for." June did not look away from him. He wore the silver feather now, on a thong that lay against the wet fabric. The metal caught a seam of light that broke through above the barn and set a small hot fire where it hung. "Stay," she said. He nodded, and the word did not feel like a promise that could be broken, because there was nowhere to put it if he did not hold it. She could see the year they had just had in the set of his shoulders. Up and down the county hands shaken in kitchens and fields and on porches where people did not step before. Days that began at dark and ended at darker. 100 small turns that added up to a different kind of wheel. The children spun in a circle and fell laughing. Maggie stood under the overhang with the mother and the baby, who had stopped coughing to watch the sky. Elias came down the steps very slow and put his hand against the post. He looked at June. He looked at Calder. He tipped his head the way a man does when he approves and cannot trust his throat with the words. The cloud pulled aside a slice, and sun jumped back through the water. A rainbow should have been a children's thing, but it pinned the ranch and the ridge together in a band you could almost walk if you were 11 and sure of your own legs. June put her palm to Calder's chest because it seemed the only thing that would say what needed saying. His heart jumped once under her hand like a trout moving in shadow. "Marry me," she said. He closed his fingers over her wrist at the same time that a new run of rain came hard enough to bounce. He smiled so wide the years fell off him. "Yes," he said. Their foreheads touched. Water slid from his hair to her cheek and cooled the last of the heat. Somewhere behind them a desk scraped and a small voice said, "Shh," in a way that meant go on. Afternoon took the sharp out of the light and left a softer edge. The kids played until Maggie sent them to the porch for towels and cups. Walt showed up with a sack of nails under his shirt to keep them dry, and a stack of papers wrapped in oilcloth that Hartley had asked him to bring. He saw the water running off the tank and whooped. He leaned his face up and let it hit like a boy, and then passed the papers to June without ceremony. She set the oilcloth on the table and did not open it yet. The rain drummed and the old house listened. Steam rose off the pathstones. The sign at the road gleamed wet and shed a drop that hung at the bottom of the D and let go. Elias shuffled to the far room and came back with his old blue coat over his arm, not to wear, but to place over the chair back. He palmed the feather in his pocket and nodded at June in a way that made her chest stretch and ache. He picked up a primer and tapped the desk with it, and the children dragged themselves inside dripping and happy and took their seats without complaint. Calder stood a moment longer in the open. He closed his eyes and lifted his face and let the rain run down his cheeks like something he had owed and finally paid. June watched the water bead on his eyelashes and break and fall. She reached up and brushed the last drops from his mouth with her thumb. He kissed her hand, and then her mouth and everything else blurred for a moment under the rain. Evening drew across the land slow and warm. The gullies that had not carried water in months spoke in small voices. The scent of the sage turned deep and green. The air cooled enough that breath felt like a gift again. June lit the lamps and their glass-burned halos that shimmered with the damp. She stepped to the threshold and looked out. The tank sent a thin overflow down its side that caught the lamplight and made a little falling fire. Beyond the yard, the fields lifted their heads. The ridge held a line of black against the last orange. The Hurries. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.